Hope everybody's enjoying their weekend. So, I've been on vacation for a little bit, spending Thanksgiving with the family. I'm sure everybody understands all of that goodness. And during that time, I reached the auspicious number of 303 subscribers. And it just keeps climbing from there, so thank you very much, and welcome to the channel. I've decided, since I've done a little bit of rearranging around here, I would do a little tour / state of the studio for this year, kind of take everybody through my process, see how the sausage is made, and just kind of pull back the curtain a little bit, to the extent that there's much of a curtain at all. So anyway, enjoy the show. Cheers. Something worth noting over here in the drum kit area too. The setup that I've got right here is actually something that I kind of dug out of the memory banks from my Navy days, back when I didn't have the drums to put together such a ridiculous arrangement. So I thought I might set it up and try it out. And of course, because I'm not a terrible mean person, I've included a few samples of me playing around on the thing. And I actually have a video idea that I'm going to make based on this that should be coming up soon. Anyway, I just wanted to make a quick mention of that. All right. So let's discuss the room layout. So it used to be that I had the drums sitting right around here and the desk sitting over there. That's no good. Number one, for sound reasons, I had something directly behind the desk, theoretically reflecting sound back and forth in an area. Usually when you're setting up a recording desk like that, you want to give yourself a little bit of length. So it made sense to move the desk over here and give myself basically twice as much room between the desk and the wall behind it. As tight as this space is, at least I could make the most of what I had there. And the other thing was that the drums, given my penchant for ridiculously large drum setups, because I have the door there and kind of some built-in restrictions here like the old fireplace mantle and stuff like that, the larger the kit got, the more difficult it was to kind of shoehorn it into this area without completely blocking off certain areas or not physically being able to put an instrument where I needed it to go. And the computers being back there also didn't help. So instead, moving the drum kit area over to here makes it easier to position those large setups in such a way that I can leave them set up for a particular period of time without having to climb through it or over it in order to get anything done in the normal course of day-to-day life around here. The other thing it allowed me to do was to centralize all of the electronics over here. The shelf unit for the computers, the recording interfaces, all of the doodads can all live in kind of the same area, because when you're using a USB audio interface, you don't have these long distances you can travel. You are limited by the maximum length of a USB cable in terms of how far you can put the computer away from your audio interface and be able to get everything to and from. Also, I was able to take my bookshelves and kind of move those out to an area where I could make better use of tiny spaces that couldn't be used for anything else, and at the same time getting those things out of the way of the main usable area. And then finally, I've got the small drum storage racks right here. So all of the tiny tom-toms and my snare drums are living right here. Although I think I might move the snare drums somewhere else because, and I didn't really think about this when I decided to put them all here, but snare buzz. I mean, you can take the snare wires, you can flip the snare wires down, but when they're sitting on their side, as often as not, the snare wires are going to rest against the head anyway, and you get snare buzz. So I think I'm going to move all of these guys just to a different storage area. I think it would be better off there. And then I can just have tom-toms right here, and tom-toms generally behave themselves. And then finally, something that I haven't done much research on yet, but eventually I do need to do some room treatment here. Right now, everything is untreated. We got low ceilings. I did build this one wall at a goofy angle so that I could eliminate at least a couple of right angles from the overall space when I was laying it out. But there's still plenty of other nasty little corners where bass and things can build up. And I'm going to start looking into that a little more and see what I can do. Not to make it totally awesome, but at least to go from maybe a less than ideal situation to something a little closer to ideal. It's important to understand that this space is not, and most likely will not be, a commercial recording studio. This is just an area where I can play my drums and work on videos of that nature. And until I am able to secure some kind of better, more ideal space, I've just got to work with what I've got. I'd like to say I didn't necessarily choose this space, the space chose me. But that's a whole other story, and we're not going to get into that. So anyway, let's take a look at the workflow around here. So besides recording voiceover, I also obviously record a lot of drums down here. Now the way that works, the way I like to do things, and this is why I have two computers. I use one computer effectively as like a 2-inch 24-channel tape machine, based on the interface that's hooked up to it. But basically that's the multi-track machine. And this is the sort of control stand for it. So I can roll this little mini desk around, position it wherever I need to behind the drum kit, and then I can start and stop the recording from there. I can also control the X32 and all of its different parameters from there. So that kind of gives me a sub desk that I can use without having to crawl out from behind the drum kit every single time. That gets all the multi-track stuff into the multi-track computer. Then I can play back out of that thing using up to, I think, 14 outputs on the X32. Mostly I just use 2. And I'll send those over to the desk. I can do whatever processing I need to do there if it needs it. And down here, of course it needs it. Not that I'm any good at it, but it needs it. Then it goes out from the desk into the main stereo inputs of the production computer, which is also where I load in all of my camera footage and cut together all the videos. By doing it this way, not only am I hearing a mix of the audio as it's being dubbed from the multi-track down to 2 tracks, but the final copy of that I'm going to need for making the video is now already recorded to the computer that I'm going to need to use it on, rather than having to export it to a thumb drive from one computer and then plug it into the other computer. It's important to note that this computer is not hooked to the internet. Number one, I need the Ethernet port on there to communicate with the X32, so that I can actually have an easier time using the mixer controls on there. The other thing is that when I upgraded this thing from Windows 7 to Windows 10, every time Microsoft updates Windows 10, my copy of Cubase thinks it's been installed on a new computer and demands that I get a new license. After a couple of times of going through this, I was like, all right, no more Windows updates. I'm not even going to give you the chance. Like, I think I tried to turn off Windows updates and they still showed up because Windows 10. And so I was like, all right, I can put a stop to this for good and all. You don't live on the internet anymore, recording computer. Which is fine. I already have plenty of machines around here that can talk to the internet, sometimes whether I want them to or not. That's kind of how I work, is that instead of using tape machines, I use computers in their stead. But the overall flow is kind of the same as if I was using tape machines, I guess. So this here is basically the audio interface section. Going through the contents of the racks, we got power conditioner, a vent, headphone amp, and my old Tascam 1641. And this little 4-unit chunk right here can actually be taken out if need be and used as sort of the basis for a portable recording rig. Take this, a computer, a few basic supplies, and a drum kit, and you've essentially got a portable recording studio here. in this position, this actually feeds power to everything else around here. And then the rack below that is another 8 units. I've got a couple of PreSonus blue tubes that probably going to have to either repair, replace, or modify into something else. Not a big fan of e-waste. I don't want to see these things end up in the trash, but they're also not doing very well as microphone preamps right now either. These two and these two ART DIO units were both bought as additional inputs for the 1641. So one of these preamps can go to channels 9 and 10 to turn from a line input into a microphone input. 2 more of these units can be used to go into the 4 direct inputs on the back of the 1641. And then either one of these ART units has a digital output and selectable sample rate so that it can be used as the master clock when going into the SPDIF inputs on the back of the Tascam. And that's how you manage to squeeze 16 inputs into this unit. Now, this thing's about a dozen years old, so Tascam has moved on significantly beyond that. And so then, we've got the 2 ART DIOs, some blank extra space, and a Behringer 4-channel direct input box that I found for a screaming deal. And figured, well, screw it, I could probably use some DIs at some point, so there they are. Then moving over here, 4 units of blank space waiting for goodies that might fill them. You can never have too much rack space. Kind of a utility shelf just for now. And then the unit that I'm actually using as my main interface, which is a Behringer X32 rack. This thing is quite the little powerhouse. Even as a 32 by 32 USB audio interface, that would be one thing. Let's say I decide that I want a better kind of interface at some point. I can still use this thing as a mixer. I can use it as the basis for an in-ear monitor rig for playing live. I mean, this thing is a box of many talents, and probably the most expensive single piece of gear I've ever bought. Then an 8-channel compressor gate from PreSonus, an ACP88. This is another one of those. I found it for like half the price that it usually goes for, and I saw that and I was like, well, that's very nobulent. But at some point I was thinking that I might have a need for multiple compressors, and rather than going out and buying 8 rack units worth of compressors, or even 4 stereo compression units, this thing would be just kind of a good item to have in my back pocket. Like, I don't have a crying need for that many compressors at once, but for the price, I just thought, go ahead and pick it up, and I don't regret it. Then, probably the most fun and important piece of gear that I have anywhere in my recording setup is my patch bay. And these are Samson S-Patch, which is a 1/4-inch TRS 48-point patch bay. And once I learned how these things are supposed to be used, it changed everything about how I set up and route lines and everything like that. I've got about 2/3 of these things full, mostly getting ins and outs from the backside of these 2 units out to front, patched through each other, or to send and return lines that go over to the desk. Some of these microphone preamps and the DIs and the ins and outs from the Tascam are also patched in, as well as the headphone amp. So that way I've got some routing flexibility. If I need more than the initial 16 channels that I can get just in the X32, I've got a handful of microphone inputs I can make by using these preamps and putting it into the aux inputs on the back of the X32. And so if need be, I can have up to 22 in and 14 out with this unit, just with what I've got in hand. If I wanted to go 32 by 32 with this, I'd have to get that digital snake and a couple of other doodads in order to get the full in-out capacity that this thing offers as an audio interface. But I don't ever need as many as 32 channels, so it's a bit overkill, but I felt like this thing was too little. If this thing is too much, that's just fine. And then beyond the 1/4-inch patch bays is a simple ART P16, an ART P16 XLR patch bay, which is just there to get the 16 microphone inputs from the back of the X32 out front where I can see their shining faces. That's basically the audio chunk right here. And of course the on-air sign that I made back when I was living, in Inglewood. The last time I was living in Inglewood, not this time. All right, so now that we've had a look at that, let's move over to the desk. So let's talk about the desk. Now, the way I built this was as 3 independent rolling units that I could either swap out or position with other things on kind of an as-needed basis. Most of the time I'm using the center desk section in video production. I've got my keyboard and my mouse and any other goodies I might need when I'm making a video. Or theoretically, I could roll that out of the way and roll in a mixer desk and just do analog audio mixing, hands-on faders, kind of old school style. Then, of course, the equipment sidecars are a couple of 8-unit racks to hold 16 units worth of the stuff that I feel I need most critically at any given time, to the extent that I need anything critically around here. The design of the sidecars is based on the Danger Fox desk, where you can basically take a normal, in this case, 8-unit rack box, and you set it into a cradle that holds it at the right height and angle as you would want it on a production desk. I did kind of the same thing, only instead of putting them into one master production desk, I made individual actual rolling sidecars that cradle those 8-unit rack boxes in much the same way. And as a bonus, they can be rolled out of the way or rearranged. When I had to rearrange this room here, it was actually quite easy to get things done because all of that heavy equipment, all I had to do was unplug anything that was tethering it to something else, roll it up real quick, and then literally roll the entire machine to its new position. So this is a system I'll probably stick with no matter what kind of a studio space I'm in because it's just simple and convenient. And then the final component of the desk is the monitor stand that is holding up both my near-field monitors and my video monitors. And finally, let's talk about the contents of these rack boxes. Of course, I've got a power conditioner up here at the top, which is actually supplying power to both sides. I just ran an extension cord to a power strip over on the other side. So I only have one cable running between the two. And also, for running audio between the two, I used a pair of Ethercon snakes that allow me to get 8 channels running between these 2 units. So 4 in one direction and 4 in the other. Basically 2 stereo pairs. It leaves me with a minimal amount of disconnecting and cable running to do in case things need to be moved or shifted around. So next down in the rack box, I've got an Apex exciter that I'm not really using right now. Next is a 2-unit blank panel for a compressor that I would like to get at some point in the future, but it's not really a high priority item and it's kind of pricey. And then below that is the right side EQ. It's a Warm Audio EQP-WA, basically the Warm Audio version of the EQP1 that so many audio engineers are fans of. And then below that is my stereo compressor, which is an Art Pro VLA2. I bought this thing because I was kind of looking for a stereo compressor that I could use as kind of my main mastering compressor. And this thing is apparently a very good value for the money, and it wasn't a lot of money, so I went ahead and snatched that up. Then when we get to the other side of the rack, I've actually got a patch bay that's taking up 3 spaces because it's one of those Behringer patch bays where all of the normaling switches are on the top of the unit. So I bought a 2-unit server rack access hatch so that I could reach in there and futz with the thing if I ever needed to. And that's all about to be replaced because that poor Behringer patch bay is on its last legs, and I've just ordered another Samson unit to replace it. And then below that is the left side Warm Audio EQ. And then right below that is kind of a little chunk that I'm actually recording this voiceover on. And it consists of a half-rack Samson C-valve mic and instrument preamp. And I use that kind of as a mono-channel mic pre. It gives me all the control I need over any kind of microphone, including phantom power and all that stuff. And then I take the single output from that, run it through a mono-channel Ashley SC50 compressor, and then that goes out into a Y splitter and is patched directly into the 2-channel input of my production computer. So when I need to record a voiceover, I hit a couple of switches, set things up, I'm ready to go very quickly. And of course, everything that I record is going right into the computer where I'm going to use that audio, just like with recording the multi-track stuff. And so that lives in its own little chunk, and then the other half of the half rack is my Samson C-Control speaker controller. And the final thing to talk about sitting on the desk as far as audio gear is this pair of Kali Audio LP6 near-field monitors. Now, this is the first good set of monitors I've ever bought in my life, and I honestly didn't know what I was missing. I had been using maybe better than average quality computer desktop speakers, and I had no idea just how bad that quality was until I bought these things. And much like the Pro VLA compressor, these came highly recommended and are definitely worth every bit of what I paid for them. Kind of serves me right for not listening to somebody when they're telling me, like, you can't mix on these computer speakers, man. You got to get yourself some real reference monitors. In terms of video monitors, I've got a pair of main screens that I use as kind of my production work area. And then the big third screen above that is kind of my all-purpose TV. I can hit a couple of switches and patch over the screen from the multi-track computer and put that directly in front of me so that when I'm dubbing down the multi-tracks down to 2 tracks from one computer to the next, I can actually sit in one spot and control both machines from that spot. So anyway, that's the production desk. So it could be considered something of a limitation, but it's also something of an advantage to have this kind of built-in bar in the place that I'm in. And I decided to turn it into an advantage. Number one, by putting so much of my audio gear onto this bar area, it gave me access out front in the main room, but it also gives me access to the back of the units at kind of a standing level so that I don't have to hunt around in the dark, reaching around behind things trying to figure out what didn't get plugged in right, especially with like a couple of hundred jacks to deal with at any given time. And then back here gives me kind of a storage area for microphone cables, and behind me I've got a little set of drawers that has various different types of specialty cables and data cables and things like that, video cables and what have you. I got a lot of cables. So anyway, microphone storage, camera storage, accessories, camera tripods, things like that, all generally have some place to live back here, and a couple of old mixers as well. And just generally speaking, it's nice to have an area that is kind of sectioned off and organized, and for as small and as tight as it is, it's a very handy little closet space. There's pretzels, you know. Hope everybody enjoyed that little walk through the studio, checking out the new arrangement. Like I said, I'm not a professional audio engineer, so much of this is a work in progress. And the space itself is a bit unorthodox, so things aren't always gonna go together in the way that people think that maybe they should, or a professional would recommend, or what have you. This is not entirely a professional operation, but it's a nice little place to have fun, which is rather the point. So I hope you all enjoyed this little trip through it. Anyway, I'm Mike Lindsay. Thanks for coming out.